going to be recorded. And I will hand it over to Susan, who's going to get us started.
Thanks, Ashanta. Good afternoon, everyone. It's hard not to hear you saying good afternoon back because I know we're all muted, but wanted to just thank you all for continuing to be our partners, and those of you who are new, thank you for joining us as partners as we get ready to launch the next phase of rental assistance. As you all have been reading in the paper, there is a lot of attention and commentary about the need for this resource for folks that suffered as a result of the pandemic economically or otherwise. And I think we did a fantastic job with phase 1, and we're looking forward to what we can accomplish with phase 2. Just wanted to introduce you to the team, some of the team, because others are still on here. I'm Susan Campbell, the one on the left. Carl will be speaking next. Carl Bradley is our Deputy Director for Housing and Strategic Programs. Ashanta Douglas is our Program Manager with the team, and Michelle Gann is also on our Housing Emergency Rental Assistance team. And Michelle, you want to wave? I don't know if you all want to flash your cameras on and just wave briefly to everyone so they can put live faces with, there's Ashanta. Put live faces with names. Hi, Carl. Okay, come on, Michelle. I don't see. No? All right. Well, we understand tech issues. Okay. So with that, am I speaking to the next slide as well? Let's continue moving on. Just to set the context a bit, we did some number crunching, and collecting data is really important to us. And I know that was a sometimes can be a heavy lift as we're also trying to run the program, but it's so helpful and so critical because it continues to help us tweak this program to make sure that it gets into the hands of the people who really need it. And so this slide just kind of provides a context of the marketplace who we are trying to assist and trying to help. As you can see that, almost half of the suburban households in suburban Cook County are renters. Half of the residents, half of the households are renters, nearly half. And of those, the majority of them are low income, which is why we showed such great numbers in our program. We also estimated, and based on the Aspen Institute and some other measures, that 56,000 households are at risk of eviction, meaning that they are behind on rent, hadn't paid rent, or started rent and hadn't paid again, or are already in line and may have already been in line prior to the pandemic occurring. And so with our first ERA program, we were able to assist 7,000 households. But when we looked at the number of folks that are in need, ineligible, and also at risk, that really represented about almost 12% of the folks who were eligible. So, this time around, we're really looking to try to do a lot more. You've been hearing in the news that these programs are slow to get the money out the door. Well, that's not ours. So don't think that that's our program, and that's largely thanks to all of you. But we do want to try to do more, given that the numbers that we've collected are showing that the need is so enormous. And then we can go to the next. And am I speaking to this? Sorry.
Pass it off to Carl.
Okay, Carl, I'm passing the baton to you to run over the summary of the program as it's going to emerge this time around.
Thank you, Susan and Ashanta. And I'll let you all know that's the first time I ever put a picture up on the screen. That was 10 years ago, so I don't look the same. To get into the intricacies of the program, let's talk about the rental assistance and utility assistance qualifications. Our goal is to come out on October the 4th with our next open round, where we'll take new applicants under the program. We're going to conclude it on October 29th, about 4 weeks later. Our goal is to stay out there over 3 weeks and 4 weekends. So the goal is to get as many applications as we can in again, and also not to be in competition with IDA nor the city, who we think their rounds may overlap us toward the end, but it won't have as much confusion as you guys are aware if you've been around since our first program. Under the rental assistance program, we cover historic unpaid rent, and we do 3 months of future rents. And the applicant, the rent period should be within the COVID eligibility period, which starts in March of 2020. We've got a total of 18 months of assistance across ERA 1 and 2. So I think it's increased steadily. Last time was 15 months. So we can go up to 18 months now. Our cap on the ERA applicant will be $25,000 per application. And inclusive of funding from ERA 1, they can't exceed $40,000. We currently have the information in our system from both ERA 1 and ERA 2 as it comes through, so we'll be able to compare. And if there's a common app, we'll be able to see both of them when they apply and be able to run as far back as we funded them into the COVID period, which was the beginning of last year. We had our rental assistance out the last part of 2020, so we can see all the information and we can cap it. But the money is capped only across ERA 1 and ERA 2. So the COVID money that came out in 2020 won't count toward that cap. Utility assistance, it's a small change here. As you know, utilities were covered. The last time we did one utility, and we said you can list your utilities and we'll take the highest one and pay it. Under this one, we're saying we're going to do 2 utilities. It can be electric, gas, or both. And then we can't exceed 18 months of utilities. And we've also taken a cap off. You notice there's no cap on utilities on this particular screen. We only got about 3% of the funds out last time in form of utilities. So this time we think we have the room to go up against all the outstanding on the utility bill if a resident has that. And hopefully that'll take some of the burden off of them, additional burden. Next slide, if we can get there. ERA 2 has expanded some of the eligibility requirements for what we pay. In our ERA 1, we typically pay just the rental amount that was due, or the rental amount that was in arrears. And this time, we're actually looking at more housing stability expenses. So if a person has to move to a new apartment, for stability purposes, we can pay for those costs under the relocation component. And it'll allow them to do moving costs, the application fees, the connection fees, the security deposit. The key criteria is there is you have to have a 6-month minimum lease. We know an annual lease is, the standard in our market, and we'd like to see that annual, but they have to have at least a 6-month minimum lease. We can also take care of folks who are in hotels and motels if they're paying the permanent rate. And the cap on that is $13.89, as you see here. So after 30 days, they become permanent residents. And if they got that lease or that arrangement with the hotel motel, that's also eligible too. If they're in eviction court, the cost of legal fees and late fees and filing fees are also eligible. We just have to get an understanding of what they are, but they weren't available in the previous installments of our ERA. So this grouping gives us sort of an expanded opportunity to help folks. And this is a different sort of processing. Yes, they still come in under our application, but we're now seeing different elements. So you got to bear with us as we sort of get the procedures down pat and work with folks and make sure we understand how people are going to be presenting these opportunities to us. On the next slide, we just go through the household eligibility. Basically, this is the same. This pretty much has not changed from ERA 1 to ERA 2. Still have to live in suburban Cook County. We're not doing the city in this particular case, and we're not doing homeowner expenses or mortgage payments either. They have to have a lease agreement. If the lease isn't current, they'll have to go to a new lease and a 6-month lease at a minimum in order to maintain their benefits. This is a difference from last from ERA 1. Because in the ERA 1, we were just taking the expired lease. I think now we're working to get that new 6-month lease in place also. They must also have the utility bill at that residence and in their name. Unemployment and hardships. Under 80% AMI has always been the standard. If they qualify for unemployment or they have a reduction in household income, that also qualifies them for that COVID exemption. And then if they can demonstrate a risk of homelessness or housing instability. The definitions of homelessness and housing instability, we got to get more information out to you to make sure we sort of meet that. But if in the last 60 days they haven't had a permanent residence or they've moved twice, or they're living on somebody's couch or sharing rooms with other folks doubled up, all those components go into that. And we need to start looking at those as a reasonable opportunity to help people get more stable in their housing going forward. Chantal. Last criteria is just going over some of the things that are required for the application. Proof of identity. For the resident side, we've always said that the Social Security card is not required. So that helps our undocumented persons or people who are documented in various ways, but we need a form of an ID, driver's license, identity card, a passport. We want to know who we're funding. At sort of the 90% mark of the last fund, we sort of look back and we think we got the money to the right people. We don't have as much fraud. So we're trying to stick with component parts that keep our funding clean, and we don't want to have intrusive parties looking at our, at our fund as an opportunity. So we try to work with each resident to make sure we get the right identification so that we know who that person is and who we're funding. On the landlord side of the street, they do. Will a copy of this presentation be made available? I thought it was a copy of the ID card. I think we can share this afterwards. It's not secretive, I don't think. Two things. One is that on the landlord side, they have to document themselves because we have to pay them. So there's a couple of things you want from them. We want their valid government license, their ID card, or their driver's license. We want their Social Security card because we're going to pay them via ACH or an electronic payment. And in that case, you want their EIN number or their cover page of their last tax return, so that we can confirm to them and we W-9 them at the end of the year that everything is being done and paid properly. Residency, rental, and utility obligation. We've already gone through most of this, but the tenant got to have that valid agreement or lease, and they have to have utility bill. We already talked about that matches their address, and with the adult homeowner, we don't want to see a second or third party person on that utility. And then on the landlord side, we have to confirm that they own the property. They can give us their deed, mortgage statements. They are also responsible for giving us the form of the rental agreement or lease. It can be expired because many people will not reissue a new lease if it expired and you haven't paid or you're behind 6 months. So we understand that, but we ask them to go into a new agreement going forward. And then if they're a third-party management company, they're working on behalf of an owner, absentee or corporate, we're looking for the management agreement to also verify that they are the party that we should be paying and working with. Looking at the next set of criteria under income, unemployment, and hardship, and the housing stability components, some of this you've already covered, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly. Unemployment claims after March 13, 2020 would be a justification. Notice of termination, furlough, or layoff from the company that they work for during that same period of time. They can also demonstrate that their bank statements and their pay stubs that they got a reduction in income after March 13, 2020. To also demonstrate the hardship, if they've got medical bills or charges against them during the COVID period for COVID-related matters, that also is evidence of the hardship. And they don't have to have all of these, as you already know. They have to have just one of them under this component part in order to be qualified. Reductions in child support or other spousal support could be another evidence of the hardship. Then we get into the things at the house, which is basically an eviction notice. They got the past due rent billings, the utility notices for cutoff. They've got evidence that the household is going to be put out, taken away from the property in a short period of time, even though they don't have any eviction in the court. They got a notice saying we need you to move next month. All of those are generally available, and we're not sticklers on this detail, I believe. And Cheryl's on the phone, but we've seen them in different forms. You've seen leases in different forms. You've seen notices in different forms. Billings that come across for COVID are not generally, formatted the same way. And HAC takes the time to actually review this with the tenant and works with them to try to figure out if they got the qualifications in place. So if somebody says, I don't have a certain thing, they have something. We try to encourage them to get evidence in that we can, make the factors happen. Is it time for us to slow down and have a couple of questions if there are any?
We're going to have, in 2 more slides, we're going to have questions.
Okay. I know we're covering a lot of ground here. So the AMI and the component parts of AMI that we're looking at is that everyone qualifies under the 80% requirement, but the 50% requirement, which is a priority that we looked at, this is priority under both the funding and that we prioritize for processing, is the 50% of AMI limits. And so you should have these available to you in the presentation afterwards. But secondly, if you're under 50%, the applications are going to get waived for documentation. And there's another component part that we're looking at. If you live in an area that has a very low income average across that particular region or that particular census tract, by address, it'll be determined if you put in less than 50%, you will also be skipping certain documentation requirements in the application itself. That's our intent. It should be working that way by the time we get up and launched. Next page, please. So just started talking about the priority that we look at in processing the applications and also inside of the Treasury requirements. The first one was, we just talked about, was the household under 50% of household income. 50% of the household income is under 50% of AMI. So we looked at that one first. If you got an individual that's employed, priority number 2, for greater than 90 days, more than below 50%, that's priority 2. And then at the top of the shield would be folks who are at risk of homelessness or are homeless. We also have a prioritization for households that are overcrowded, which is 2 members per bedroom, or they have greater than 2 members per bedroom in a household, or 1.5 parties in a studio. The household with incomes at or below 80% qualify, but they would be last in terms of consideration. But you should know that literally we take the applications in as they come. So no one at 80% is held off. They're just put into the processing queue in terms of that prioritization. So if someone at 80% came in on day 2, and then we've got 400 applications for priorities 1 to 4, they'll still be processed. They may not go into the queue on day 2, but they're probably going on day 3 or day 4 as availability is there for processing. So it's not like we're going to hold somebody off until the end. And until now, we have not been oversubscribed in terms of applications such that we've had to hold off and determine some other mechanism to fund. We generally are able to process everyone, and on the daily screens, they're put into the processing queue based on the priorities. I think at this time, I'm supposed to slow down for questions if there are any before passing the baton.
Yes. Question. There were questions in the chat were answered. I'm just going to raise them again. For the recording, we will be recording this and sharing the slides. So for the people who asked about whether the slides would be sent out, they will be. There's also a question from Lolita about zero income. Are people eligible if they have zero income? Which they are eligible, and they can complete a self-attestation for zero income, and the HAC staff member will follow up for any questions or confirmation of their income or lack thereof. Okay. And then I think as well, someone asked about self-attestations. There is a self-attestation, which we're going to get to application and how the application looks in a few, but there is a link to a self-attestation form that people can use if they don't have documentation for certain items. So a couple of new questions that we haven't answered yet. Is this just for suburban Cook County, or is Chicago eligible? And just to reiterate, this is for suburban Cook County. Chicago has a separate program, and we will share the link as well on the application to get more information about the Chicago program. But Carl, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm good. I just realized my mic was off. I apologize.
No problem. Okay, the next one. Just for clarification, are tenants required to provide an up-to-date lease, I'm assuming, because many of our clients couldn't renew their lease due to no payment. So you can use an expired lease as well. But I didn't know, Carl, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, we have both the requirement is that they have a lease. The requirement is not that it be up to date. So if they had an expired lease, we're more than accepting of that. We're encouraging them to get a new lease, and we're trying to figure out ways to encourage the landlord not to pursue evictions within our documents that they have to sign. So the goal is to keep them stable, not just to pay the rent, but that they also be stable in that location.
Thank you.
I'll handle the next one. So we still have people who applied in March, and they were approved, and the landlord utility still have not received the money. For those kind of cases, we need to know who they are. You should ask us to look those up and try to figure it out. We have had cases where folks have gotten checks that were not directed to them, or payment went to the wrong location. So we would be concerned if someone was approved and they applied in March, they were approved, they still haven't received the money. So everybody who has been approved to date has been funded in our book. So we need to understand that's a question, and we need to look that particular file up. In terms of prioritization and getting the money out quickly, two things. A completed application allows us to process the quickest possible, and it's relatively short order, within a couple of weeks. Once the application hits the queue, and most of these applications were not sitting around. So within 30 days, most of the 90% of the applications that we had in were put through for review. Problem is that they didn't get completed. All right. So the landlord portion was not done. The payment portion wasn't confirmed. Those are all the component parts that made it difficult for actually get the money out the door. And I think Cheryl just says send her the names and she can check on them and make sure they got paid. Okay. But that completed application is our key, and that's the key that allows us to move the quickest, or allows HAC to move the quickest in terms of processing. So we really advise folks to try to work to get to completion. How do we know if they receive ERA assistance? Can you explain that one, Sylvia?
How, because sometimes people doesn't say if they receive assistance before. So how can we make sure if they receive it or not?
I don't know if you can make sure, but we can make sure on our end, because we share data with the state and the city. They're all in the same database. So we'll check the database to see if they were paid by others before we fund. Cheryl has her hand up.
Okay, thank you.
Cheryl, are you responding to this question here?
I think she's on mute. Hold on one second. Yeah, I think she's on
So
mute.
hopefully I won't contradict Cheryl. But we have within our processing system a check of all the other parties that are funding around the state. So that would be the state of Illinois through IDA, Illinois Department of Human Services through their clients, and the city of Chicago. So the risk of funding is reduced, or double funding is reduced, but it's not perfect. That's about the best way we know how to sort of determine if we funded already. Of course, we have all of our data for the last 3 rounds available to us too. Who should we specifically call to ask if clients have received ERA funding? There's 2 things. One is that the client should be able to. You're asking to see if a client that's walking in has received ERA funding. Am I answering that correct, Mary? Am I reading that correct?
Yes, because you said that we could connect with you guys to find out, but I'm not sure who specifically we need to call or email, or is there a website we can go on to get that information?
Yeah, no, you won't be able to. If they're coming in and asking for an application or to help with funding, the goal is to just get the application in.
Okay.
And let's do the third-party searches on our side.
Okay.
Okay, so you don't have to worry about that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, if the housing provider does not cooperate or provide their information, is there a way to go around that? So I'm saying if the landlord or the property manager doesn't approve it, there is a process. We have to give them a shorter period now, and we have to give them let's say a week of notices, 2 notices in a week. If they don't respond, then we can process the tenant alone. And in that case, they'll cut a check to the tenant, and the tenant will be responsible to pay their own rent to the landlord. All the other verifications remain in place. We'll still check to see if the property is owned by the parties that's named on the application. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I think Cheryl is now able to talk. Cheryl, if you had.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
you're fine, Cheryl. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I was auto muted on the phone, sorry.
That's fine.
So just back to what Jory was saying about some of the payments too. When we assigned out the cases initially, we assigned out cases that were fully submitted. And so we had, I don't even know, 5,000 or so cases at the end that were not fully submitted. Either the landlord didn't submit or the tenant didn't submit. And so those are cases that we are reviewing, but they get reviewed on the tail end, as we're getting through the fully submitted ones first. So that's why it's really important to make sure that, the applications do get fully submitted so that we can assign them out right away. And we do assign every day. And so whatever cases come in, typically will get assigned out every day. But they fall into the case auditor's queues in the same way, like the prioritization falls into their queues the same way. So all of them know to get the high priority ones first and then work their way down.
And speaking towards the end of that, we made a decision, because the Cheryl said they were processing fully completed applications or fully submitted applications. When we got toward the end of that grouping, we said we have both the capacity in terms of staff time and money available to work on the incomplete applications. So they went into the priorities of folks who have very low incomes or excessive unemployment to try to cultivate the applications and bring them in. So you've probably been working with folks who were 3 or 4 months after the round definitely began, and sometimes after it ended, they were still trying to get them to complete the application, work with them to try to figure out where the issues were, and definitely try to figure out those where the absentee landlords weren't in the applications to work with those families too. I don't know if we'll have that luxury going forward, but that was what we did in the last round.
And I did want to go back to the question that Crystal asked that I think we may have accidentally skipped over. I have clients who are still pending from the March campaign, but both the tenant and landlord haven't heard anything. Who should I contact to get them assistance? I did want to just say that there's a high likelihood, Crystal, that they did not submit or complete the application because we've gotten through most of the applications that were either submitted by a tenant only or both a tenant and a landlord. But Cheryl, I didn't know if you want to answer any.
I don't know if Cheryl can answer, or she probably would have jumped in. So let's take a stab at it. Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong. The likelihood, let me just be straightforward on this. The likelihood of that occurring is limited. Either they gave us the wrong or incorrect contact information, but we've worked through most of those apps and make sure that we have a contact with someone. So both of them not having heard is pretty unlikely. So if there is a case, you need to send the name and the application number and let us look at it and try to figure out where the gap is. But it's highly likely that we got the wrong contact information. They haven't heard anything since their application came in from March.
Yeah, because the only ones that are sitting out there still from the March are the ones that are not fully submitted. So, you know, I think I said a few minutes ago that we had 5,000 plus applications that were only partially submitted when the application window closed. And now we're down to, you know, just a little over 2,000. So we've gotten through a bunch of those. But if the applicant was the one who submitted the application, there are still 750 of those cases that have not been reviewed at all. So there is a possibility that they could be in that number, or they could be in the landlord, where the landlord submitted and the tenant did not. Although what we're finding on those is that landlords just entered an application for every single tenant that they had, whether they were eligible or not, or whether they needed the assistance or not. So there were a bunch of those that were denied because the tenant did not respond at all. So the assumption, I guess, was that they were not interested or did not need it, because we typically will email to communicate, because obviously you can keep track of that email correspondence. But what the staff was instructed to do is, if their emails were, like, you know, falling on deaf ears, so to speak, they were supposed to call either the landlord or the tenant just to verify that you know, is the correct email address, because that is, like Carl said, a lot of them, we did not get the correct email addresses. And so the communication attempts, you know, sometimes did not yield anything.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl. Sorry, Shanta. This is Crystal. When I looked in on the rental relief site, it just says pending, and the landlord is the one who initiated the application, and the tenant has put everything in. So who would I send the case ID or the case number and the whatever other information is needed to?
Yeah, you can send that to me. I'm going to say that right now it's because the application was not even started before April 9th, because there is not one single fully submitted case in here that was started prior to the deadline of 5 p.m. on 4/9. So there are fully submitted cases here, but they are ones that were not submitted prior to the deadline. So those have not been, you know, nothing's happened with those. So it's a possibility that it could be in that group. You can email me with the name, and if you know a case number, that's great. Otherwise, just the name of the landlord, the name of the tenant, and I can take a look and see.
Okay, I will do that then. Thank you.
I know there's some other questions that we were able to answer, but I also think that they get to the next part of our presentation. So I think I might just keep us moving and then come back to those questions. Okay. So now we're going to kind of jump into your role as a community partner and how you can best help with the application. We have in the appendix, a full overview of the application as well as the steps. But for today, we're just going to go through it at a high level, and then we will share the presentation that has the full appendix that you can click through. So just to get us started with your role as a community partner, all of you completed a survey that, requested your support for this program and in which ways you wanted to support the program. And so there's a number of different items that we have really need your help with. First and probably most importantly is marketing and outreach, because we know how critical it is that people know about the program in order to apply, and we can't really help the people in need if they are unaware of this funding. And so most people have signed up to help with marketing and outreach, and we'll be talking further about marketing and outreach on Thursday. And we'll be sharing a marketing toolkit that has flyers, social media copy, newsletter copies, and other materials that you can use in order to spread the word. The next thing is case management. You all have, robust networks of clients that you've been helping with various different things, and that's a part of continuing this work. So making sure people are aware of counseling opportunities, transitional housing, homelessness services is all part of this work that we're doing. And so anytime you have a client, whether they're eligible for this program, maybe they aren't eligible because they make over 80% AMI, and therefore you need to connect them with other services. That's something that we really encourage everyone to do, to communicate with their clients and help them get the assistance they need for their housing stability. The next thing is accepting call center referrals. So this year, moving forward, we will have a call center through Yardi. Yardi is the platform that, the company that runs our application platform. And so we have a call center through Yardi because we felt they would be best equipped to ensure that they're answering questions about the application, responding to technical issues such as the wrong email address or things like that. Being able to get into the application and make those changes, we think will really improve our experience for people who have issues as they're going through the application. But we also know that you all were crucial in helping to take referrals from Catholic Charities and to help people as tenant representatives, or to help them with uploading their documents, or to walk through the application with them, and we still will maintain that. So what we will do is if a person calls this number, which will open on October 4th, when they call this number and they need assistance, they will either be helped by a Yardi call center staff member, or that person will, if they need a lot more kind of hands-on assistance, I would say, if they need someone who's going to be their tenant representative, which we'll talk about what that is in a second, or if they need someone who can help them in person with the application, help them scan items in, then they will be transferred to Catholic Charities, who will connect them with all of you. And so some of you have signed up to take call center referrals from Catholic Charities, and that will work the same way as it did last time. The information will go into HMIS from the Catholic Charities call center, and then you will be notified that you have a kind of referral in the HMIS system, and you can reach out to that person to assist them. And then the next thing is application support. So kind of what we just talked about, walking through, answering their questions from tenants or landlords, helping to collect documents and navigate the online application portal, which we're going to walk through the key highlights of today, and then also providing just any other technical and administrative support to people who need it. So to go on to the next part, how to apply and who can complete an application. So Carl touched on this. The application window opens on October 4th, and when it opens, it's open to both tenants and landlords. I know that's maybe different from the state, and I know some of you are helping the state with their application, but for us, we are opening the portal to both groups of people at the same time. And so if you're a tenant and you apply for rental utility assistance, you just go on, you apply. And once they apply, the landlord is notified that same, once they hit submit, they need to make sure they have the right contact information in the system for their landlord. That landlord is then notified and asked to complete their portion of the application. You can be there to help support people, let them walk through the application on their own without a lot of support. Maybe you're just there to help them upload their documents or to answer questions as they're walking through it. And then same thing for property owners or landlords. When you're, a landlord, you're going to go in, sign up as a landlord. And if you're tenant, if you have tenants that you need to apply, you can add multiple tenants into the same login and to, various different properties that you may have. And those people will be notified to complete their portion of the application. Then there is the tenant representative role, which I referenced on the last slide. A tenant representative is a person, community organization representative, or it can even be a family member, someone who's going to register and complete the application on behalf of a tenant who may need more hands-on assistance. This is the best option for people with limited or no access to technology or an email address, people with limited English proficiency requiring, more extensive language assistance. And so we want to reiterate that while all of you can serve as tenant representatives, this is for people who need more extensive assistance. As a tenant representative, you would log in. Most of you have probably already done this, but you would create a login on the portal, select tenant representative, and then you can add multiple tenants to that same login and complete the application and submit it on their behalf. It has the same questions and the same requirements. It's just that you're completing the application for them. So now I'm going to kind of walk through the different major groupings of the application. And again, like I mentioned before, the full steps are in the appendix, which we're not going to go through today, but they are going to be shared so that you can see them and utilize them as you're assisting people. So to start us off, as I mentioned, you can register on the main screen of the portal, of the application portal. When you register, when you click register now here at the bottom, you'll be asked again if you're a landlord, a tenant, or a tenant representative. Tenant representatives only need one account, even if they're helping multiple tenants. After registering for an account, you will use the code that's sent to your email to verify your account and then log into the portal. Similar to tenant representatives, I did want to say to landlords, they also don't need multiple accounts. You create one account as a landlord. If you have 3, 4, 10 tenants that need assistance, then you would just add them each to the same login. Okay. So then on the next screen, the first screen that you'll see of the application is the pre-eligibility screen. And what we really wanted to point out here is that this is the screen where it's going to, ask a few questions, clarify information. And if you are not eligible, say, for example, because you do not live in suburban Cook County, or you do not have any economic hardship, your income is over 80% AMI, then you'll be notified on this screen when you hit save that there's something that's impacting your eligibility. One thing I want to note too on the screen is that applicants can save and return to their application at any time. But to the conversation that was happening earlier, if it's not submitted, then it won't be reviewed by a HAC staff member. So the next screen is going to ask for demographic information. And so, basic information about the individual, including their name, birthday, gender, etc. The social security number is not required. So if you want to opt out, you just select this box here. I'm not providing social security number, and that is sufficient. And now I'm going to pass it to Michelle, who's going to kind of take you through the next part of the application.
All right, so the next part is going to be income documentation and rental information. And so as a reminder, the appendix has every kind of slide, every screenshot from the portal, but here just the highlights to remember around income and income documentation is that not all tenants will see the screen. Depending on the tenant's zip code, if they live in a low income census tract, this requirement will be waived and they won't have to fill out this section. And you won't have to worry about that. For those who do, it's just worth noting that when you fill out income, that the amounts that they're asking for are monthly, not annual. And so that will obviously change by a lot. And, they don't have to have every kind of income. They can just check the little box in the second kind of column that says NA if they don't receive that particular income type, and they won't have to upload any documentation. I know someone asked earlier if zero income people are eligible. They definitely are. And so what you can do here is just like leave your wages, tips, and incomes as zero. You will download the self-attestation document that is prompted on the screen. You can also circulate that if you have trouble finding it. And once you have that self-attestation, you're able to just fill that out and attest to the fact that you don't have any. So those are just some of the things that you should remember in this income and rental information section. The next section is for landlord info and utilities. For landlord information, I know we've talked about this a little, but it's really, really important to provide the right contact information for the landlord information, just to make sure there are no typos in the email address and phone number, as that is a big reason sometimes applications don't get processed because the landlord isn't able to complete their portion. And so if that's something I would just recommend you work with your tenant to double check. We also recommend just talking to the tenant and asking them to talk to their landlord so that they know that this is something to look forward to expect. And then the utility section itself is pretty straightforward. You can submit for both electric and gas, or just one, whichever the tenant needs. And then you would just kind of fill out how much you owe and then provide documentation where you can. And then the last section here is documentation, and then you eventually submit the application. Here with documentation, this is where you will submit a lot of the kind of required documents that we had been talking about earlier. Some of those include ID, your proof of hardship, an eviction notice, things like that. Here again, I just want to emphasize that you can use a self-attestation document for 3 portions. You can either use it for income, for past due rent or utility, or housing instability and or experience hardship during COVID-19. So if a tenant doesn't have something that they feel like can prove that, they can submit that self-attestation and upload it right here, and that's where they would do that. For property, I'm going to just answer Whitney your question really quickly about if it's a property management company, would they put the property manager name as a landlord? So the property manager being the person who is like interfacing with the tenant, or you would want to put the person who owns the property. So not just like the employee, but like the person who owns it, and then the correct contact information, whoever that they have been interfacing with to get documents signed, things like that, paying rent. And that might be something where the tenant might have to have a conversation with the property management company and make sure that that it's going to the right person and it's being seen by someone. So especially if you have a bigger company, you would want to like really talk to your landlord and make sure like, okay, this is something that's coming your way. You will have to fill it out, and you would just want to make sure you're putting something where someone will pick up the phone, someone will check their email. And then for documentation, the last piece is just to say, before you submit the application, all the sections will have to be complete. If a section is incomplete, you'll see a little triangle with an exclamation mark that's yellow. You won't be able to submit the application if something is marked as incomplete. And that's just a very important process because you need to click submit in order for like the hack staff to review it.
Thanks, Michelle. And I did want to note something that Cheryl put in the chat, that it is monthly gross income and not net income. Okay, Cheryl, did you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, I just, on the property management company, because this is one place where it sometimes can get a little bit confusing about what people put there, right? So I think it asks for the name of the company first and then the contact person. And so we see a lot of different things there. So let's just say it's ABC Property Management Company and Cheryl Sealing is the contact person. The tenant would put ABC Management Company Cheryl Sealing as the contact person, even though ABC Management Company doesn't own the property, which is okay because we have to verify proof of ownership a different way. And with property management companies, we look for property management agreements anyway. Sometimes they'll put, the owner, that it's, Carl Bradley Enterprises owns it, and then Cheryl Seeling's the contact person. So they put a bunch of different things there. We just have to figure out when we're processing them, is this really the owner, or is this an agent for the owner? Do we need a management agreement? Because it's hard, it's hard to get that message out about what really to put there. One of the things that we've been trying to impress upon larger management companies is that they tell their tenants what email address and who the contact person is, because that's another thing that sometimes delays it, is they're using an email address of somebody who isn't going to be responsible for, the rent collection. And so that person either doesn't get it, or they don't do anything with it. Or there's too many different people within the organization that these applications are going to, and they want to kind of centralize it on their end. So we try to impress upon them, tell them who the contact person should be, and what email address. A lot of, like, First Key Homes has Chicago Rent Assistance at First Key Homes. And so they have a few people who monitor that email box, right? Invitation Homes is inquiries at Invitation Homes. And same thing, they have a few different people who monitor that, but all the applications go to the same place. So, if you are working with a landlord, as a representative for the landlord, just, make sure that he or she does tell the tenant exactly what email address they want used, because that's how the applications get linked, and that's how the invitation to complete the application is based on the information that either the landlord or the tenant puts in the application.
Thank you. And one of the things I mentioned earlier that I wanted to come back to, based on, getting through this kind of overview of the application, is the question that you asked about being notified if your tenant receives if the client you're working with receives payment. And so for, privacy reasons, obviously we can't share people's personal information, and we also wouldn't necessarily know who in your organization to even share that with. So if you're working with someone and you want an update on how they're doing, you need to just ask them to check their status. They can check their status in the portal. They also now can sign up for text message, and that will be another way they can be notified of their status. But yes, we can't necessarily reach out to each of the community partners and let them know what, how their clients are doing in the portal, but that's something just to communicate. And that, checking your status, making sure to do that through the portal is really important, and checking your email for status updates is important, because HAC receives so many messages that they can't, respond to every status request. People need to check their status on their own. So I would just impress upon you just to let people know that. So moving forward, just wanted to touch on some of the other programs that we are kind of working through, and some of the other initiatives. So in addition to assisting new applicants, ERA 2 is allowing Cook County to support people who are in eviction court and recertify applicants that were approved in ERA 1. So if you are, if you have a client who is facing eviction and has a eviction court date upcoming, they need to be a resident of Cook County, but it's not too late for them to get assistance. The HAC authority, the Housing Authority of Cook County, will be available to assist during virtual court with applications. And residents with pending eviction cases will be the first priority for review. Again, though, the most important thing is they don't have to wait for court. If you have a client who has been served with an eviction notice and has an eviction date pending, please tell them to start an application now on the hacrentrelief.com website. Now we're not opening the portal to everyone until October 4th, but we also don't want to wait until people who are, facing pending evictions are at eviction court. We want to assist them as soon as possible. So that's something that we just want to let you know, that they can go into the portal now and they could apply for assistance in the case that they're facing eviction or they have a pending eviction case. Okay. And then the next one is recertification. Starting, in the next week, we want to begin reaching out to people who were approved during ERA 1 and can receive up to 3 months of additional funding to be recertified. So if you know of someone who was approved during ERA 1, they may be eligible for 3 additional months. The Treasury does cap assistance across both ERA 1 and ERA 2 at 18 months total. So if they received 15 months last time, then they can only receive 3 more months. But if they only received 6 months the first time, they can receive, 3-month increments, they can receive additional recertification. So tenants will need to log back into the portal with the same username and password that they used for ERA 1. Nothing will change there. They need to log in with the same username and password. And then they will be asked to kind of just confirm information from their first case. So they don't have to start a whole new application from scratch. Most of their information will be saved in the system. They will just have to go through and confirm like their current location, their landlord information, things like that, to make sure all of that information is accurate and the same before they submit. And then recertifications have to be initiated by a tenant. They can't be initiated by landlords. They have to be initiated by a tenant. They can initiate a recertification even if they have a new landlord. There will be an option for them to select same landlord or new landlord. So switching locations won't necessarily change or hurt their recertification. So I'm going to pause there to see if we have any questions. It looks like, Hilda, you have a question. I have a tenant who's currently working with okay, you're trying to find out which month she was assisted for, if no someone from the state got back to you. Can you kind of elaborate on that question? Make sure that I'm understanding your question correctly.
So can I talk
Yeah, we can
here?
Yeah, we can
Oh,
hear you.
okay, so I'm currently working with a client who got help in 2020 for ERA. And what's going on is that our person who is our banker for Catholic Charities on the South Suburban Cook County side will not go forward and proceed because she has been assisted. He just wants to make sure what months she was assisted so we don't do the same months over, if that makes sense. So she needs help now, but we want to make sure that we don't use the same months that she got help for. It was for the ending of 2020 to the beginning of 2021. So my whole thing is that no one's getting back to us. I called, I emailed, and I just need to help this individual with this year. And it's not even that many months. So I'm trying to get help with that.
So they applied for Cook County assistance, but you just don't know what months of Cook County assistance they received funding for.
Correct.
No, they had IDA funding, right, in 2020. Let me make sure we understand what the question was. Who did they get funding from in 2020, IDA or the county?
It's IDA.
Right. So IDA's funding in last year was $5,000. It was capped, and everybody got $5,000 for the most part. They capped it.
Yeah, that's what I know. I know it was 5,000, but what my banker is telling me is that we have to make sure it's not for the same months, and I'm letting him know that it's not. But he said we got to wait to see what they tell us first. But they're not getting back.
Are they requesting for 2021 assistance, or are they asking to go back into 2020?
Her assistance was 2020 and some of 2021, the beginning.
That's what she's
Yeah.
asking for assistance with now, right?
Yes, but it's later months, so it's from the summer on.
Oh, so the summer months, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because Ida's funding stopped as of December last year, if I remember correctly. It was December 2020 is what they paid to the 5,000. They didn't go into this year, did they?
Oh, okay.
No, Carl,
Okay.
that's correct. They're in both the state and us are, we didn't pay for any rent past 12/31 of 2020. But I typed into the chat, can you ask the landlord for a rent payment ledger where he just shows you the charges of the rent, the
Yes.
payment received, and the balance?
Thank you guys. I actually did, and I sent it to our banker. However, that wasn't good enough. I'm hearing. So their response was that we need to receive information from Ida as to what was paid for with this particular individual. So I can't move forward with her case because of it. Is there anything I can do?
I can't speak for Ida, but I know that they did say before in our coordination calls that they weren't necessarily going to be able to answer everyone's questions about when someone was paid for. Like that was something that they had shared with us in the past, that they wouldn't necessarily be able to say this is what the months were applied for. So I maybe would just I don't know if there's any way to move forward with the banker using the information that Cheryl said, like with the tenant ledger, because I know that we can't speak for Ida, but I don't think that they're responsive to like those requests because they have a lot of them that come in.
Yeah, but we need the tenant ledger. Is it enough time for her to apply under our window, or for them to apply under our window in October?
Are you asking me or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she could still apply for this funding. I don't know. I was just waiting to hear if someone could give me more.
I think you're probably using the IDHS third-party money, right? You're going to the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have any input into their decision-making. We talk with the agency outside of that, but can't figure out why they're not looking at the ledger and doing the calculations. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to try to move forward with this one then and see how that goes, because I feel like it's just time and time and time. And, I don't want her to get evicted.
Yeah. Is she in eviction court?
Not quite. Not yet.
Okay. Well, you got
very
time.
close to it.
Yeah, miracles never cease, but you got time to figure it out.
I appreciate you guys so much.
Thank you. Okay, and then
Cheryl, any other advice, Cheryl?
No, I mean, it is kind of a shame, right? Because the ledger would show where the payment was applied to, and you should be able to see the remaining balance. The only other thing that I could suggest for now is if your banker will allow you to pay the rent from 2021, because Ida did not pay past 12/31, and that was probably on their website, like that the payments were not going to go past 12/31, and they would, be able to confirm that, and then just pay 2021 assistance for her.
And the forward assistance, and that would probably keep her out of eviction court.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. And that's why I sent the ledger to him so that I could move forward with payment of this year. But it didn't work out that way. So I guess I'm going to go ahead and ask him if he could look up the website to make sure that no payments were made after December of 2020.
Yeah, we know that's a fact. That's
okay.
A fact. If we need help, just drop us an email. We'll see if we can get you more to that.
If you could put your email in the chat, I will greatly appreciate you.
Oh, I don't do that. I don't have just check.
Okay, I want to be cognizant of time, and we have another question from Derek, but to clarify, if a tenant received less than 15 months of assistance in ER1, should they submit a new application. They don't need to submit a new application. They just log back into the portal. It will, if they've been approved, on the screen when they log in, they'll be on the status screen, and there will be a place for them to select recertification, and they will confirm their information and submit that new information, but it's not a new application. And that is whether they got less than 15 months or right at 15 months, they can be recertified for 3 additional months. And it can only be 3 months at a time. So they could recertify more than once, but their assistance will be 3 months at a time, which is the guidance that's been provided by the Treasury. Okay.
Did we say the recertification dateline? I don't remember heard.
Oh, sorry. Yes. You mean as far as when we are going to start recertification?
Yes.
On September 20th, we're going to email everyone who was approved, let them know that they can recertify. Okay. Michelle, do you want to go through these last couple of slides?
Yep. Yeah. So I just wanted to go over reporting really quickly. We'll be sending out this kind of form for the community partners for you all to fill out. But it's basically just going to be tracking how many clients you're assisting, name, email, organization. It's pretty straightforward, number of households assisted. And I just wanted to kind of give you all a heads up on that. And if you have any questions about the form, actually, the next slide will be who you can contact with any of your questions around any community development, community partner things. And so each of your organizations has a designated staff member within Cook County's BED. So it's either Elizabeth or Pamela, and you can see their emails right here. So if you have any questions about reporting, about anything else, please feel free to reach out to your designated community development lead. And then last slide is just if you all have any questions, we're gonna open up space for that, but I just want to run through. If you have marketing related questions, Dooney is our point person, and so you can see her email here and reach out. I've already just talked about, Pamela and Elizabeth being your organization's designated community development lead. And then if you have any questions about the application itself, you can basically call the call center. This is going to be our new phone number for ERA2 call center, but I believe that won't be open until October 4th until we launch. But you all should have the Catholic Charities call center number. If you have any questions about applications from ERA1, you can call them for any status questions around that. Otherwise, I know, Carl has graciously shared his email, and you can reach out to us as well, but these are who you can reach out to for the various topics. And then I just want to open up for any other questions that we didn't get to the last hour and a half or so.
So there was a change to the call center procedure. This new number goes to the Yardi call center. Am I correct in saying that, team? Where they'll handle technical questions regarding the application, the input, et cetera. They also will have the Catholic Charities Help Center line at their disposal. So if residents are asking for more than just the application check-in or the application documentation, how to do it, they'll get a referral to that number. Slightly different than last time. We want to have all the technical questions go there so that those questions get answered quickly.
Yes, thank you. And Jory just shared that specifically, just to clarify, that's the Catholic Charities call center, so that they can answer, questions or help transfer people to one of the community partners who are providing assistance. But the call center for, assistance on the application, technical assistance, that will be here, and we'll share this slide. Okay. Someone says, does anyone know how to download the chat from this meeting? That is where the extent of my knowledge ends. I'm not 100% sure how to download it. I'm not sure if you can. Usually when I've had to do it, I've just copied the questions out. But one thing I did want to point out, we are going to be meeting on, and Hillel's recording all the questions and answers. Thanks, Hillel. So one thing I was going to note is that we will be meeting on Thursday. So it can be either you're all welcome. Also, if someone at your organization is going to be your primary point of contact for marketing related activities, they should really be on that call, because we're going to go over the the program overview again, we're also really going to dive into how to market, the marketing toolkit, and all of those items. We're also going to share the frequently asked questions after that presentation, and so that will probably answer a lot of the questions that you all have posed here. Someone asked about HMIS. Are we following the same tracking procedures as we did in round one? Yes. When there is a referral from Catholic Charities, they will put that person's information into the HMIS system, and then you will get notification. Or if you have a direct walk-in, if someone comes directly to you, they're one of your existing clients, and you know they need rental assistance help, you can log them into HMIS so that you can kind of track who you've helped with this program. So it will be the same. And I believe everyone has access to HMIS. So if there's any questions you have about HMIS or you have any issues, please let us know. But I think that you should all have that process down. Okay. Well, we ended a little early. I did want to just, be available for any other questions. So, awkward silence is totally fine. We'll wait and see if anyone has any other questions. But if not, thank you for attending. And just to reiterate, we'll share the appendix, which has all the screenshots of the application. Thank you, everyone. I think we can stop the recording now. Thank you.